In 1964, Ford built 100 of the most dominant drag racing machines ever made. The Thunderbolt. A Fairlane stuffed with a 427 engine making over 500 horsepower, stripped to 3,200 pounds, with fiberglass panels and seats ripped from a van. Ford lost $2,000 on every one. They invoiced the first 11 to factory race teams for $1 each. Today, a genuine Thunderbolt sells for $385,000. But roughly 40 of those 100 cars have vanished, and the production records that could prove which survivors are real are gone. A $200,000 authentication gap, 18 rebodied cars the community acknowledges but will not identify. In a collector car underworld where restoration and forgery are the same thing, this is the Thunderbolt files. To understand how we got here, you need to understand the corporate psychosis that created this program in the first place. In 1962, Lee Iacocca walked into Henry Ford II's office with a problem. Ford was bleeding the youth market to Chevrolet and Chrysler. The company was, in Iacocca's words, nearly invisible to car-crazy baby boomers. Iacocca's solution was total performance. An all-out factory racing blitz across NASCAR, NHRA, Le Mans, Indianapolis, and international rallying. The Thunderbolt was the drag racing weapon, but the real motivation ran deeper than market share. In 1963, Ford tried to buy Ferrari. Months of negotiations, millions spent on due diligence. And then, at the final moment, Enzo Ferrari exploded. Franco Gozzi, who was in the room, described it as a tirade he had never seen or heard in his entire life. Ferrari called Ford executives worthless sons of whores who ran a big ugly factory. Many Ford executives believed Enzo was never serious. They thought the entire negotiation was leveraged to extract a better deal from Fiat, which did acquire a stake in Ferrari by 1965. Henry Ford II's response became legendary. "All right, we'll beat his ass." The Thunderbolt program, the GT40, and the Cobra were all part of that push. All of it was partly a billionaire's revenge project. Ford spent what likely amounted to tens of millions of dollars across the decade on racing, but you will not find a single racing line item in their budget. The spending was deliberately obscured, routed through a web of external contractors. Shelby American, Holman and Moody, Carcraft, Dearborn Steel Tubing, Ford Advanced Vehicles in England. The 1966 Le Mans push alone was estimated at $10 million. And the Thunderbolt program? Those first 11 cars were invoiced for $1 each to factory race teams. The drivers submitted detailed event reports after every race. It was marketing disguised as sales. Now here is where I need you to pay attention, because this next part is why we are really here. If you are finding this fascinating and want to see more deep dives into automotive conspiracies, hit that subscribe button right now. I cover stories like this every week, stories the mainstream automotive press will not touch. Now let us talk about the missing records. Every conspiracy needs a missing document. The Thunderbolt story has a big one. Dearborn Steel Tubing built all 100 Thunderbolts under contract from Ford. Andy Houghton founded DST in 1949 after pulling off a legendary hustle. He pitched Ford on dual exhaust systems by secretly installing a more powerful Mercury flathead in the demonstration car. Ford signed, and DST became their go-to skunk works for decades. They built everything from the 1962 White House limousine to the World S Fair exhibits to the Mustang II concept car. The Thunderbolt program in late 1963 and early 1964 was their most famous assignment. But the production records from that program, the definitive documentation of which chassis and VINs were converted into genuine Thunderbolts, are effectively gone. The company relocated from Dearborn to Romulus, Michigan, sometime in the late 1970s or the 1980s. By 1989, a visitor to the facility found it operating as Diversified Services Technology. It later became DST Industries Incorporated. By January 2020, DST Industries announced an asset sale with 122 employees terminated. Every key DST personnel member who worked on the Thunderbolt program is now dead. Andy Houghton died in 2004. Norm Miller is gone. Jim Hammer Mason and his son Tim, who later operated the Dearborn Steel Tubing brand, are also gone. When Dennis Colodzier and 3 others founded the Thunderbolt Owners Association, they found very little factual information available about the Thunderbolt. They spent years reconstructing the documentation, car by car. Multiple forum members who called DST Industries reported the company had zero interest in or knowledge of historical vehicles. The question of who benefits from missing records has an uncomfortable answer. Anyone selling a car that might not be what they claim. A genuine documented Thunderbolt sells for $200,000 to $385,000. A base 1964 Fairlane 500, the exact platform from which Thunderbolts were built, is worth under $20,000. A high-quality clone sells for $18,900 to $60,000. That value gap of $150,000 or more creates what vintage car attorney Brian Shook calls fertile ground for the criminal mind. Now let me show you just how vulnerable the authentication process really is. The most explosive statistic in Thunderbolt research comes from a tracking analysis. 43 known survivors, 17 unknown or unaccounted for, 22 destroyed or scrapped, and 18 rebodied. That last number should raise alarms. 18 of the original 100 Thunderbolts have had their bodies replaced. A regular Fairlane 500K code two-door sedan body substituted for the original Thunderbolt body, or vice versa. A Canadian Rotter forum member put it bluntly. Some of the current restorations, not all, are rebodies masquerading as original cars. This is the fundamental authentication vulnerability. Thunderbolts were not born on a separate assembly line with unique VIN numbers. They started as ordinary Fairlane 500K code two-door sedans, built on Ford's regular Dearborn assembly line, then shipped to DST for conversion. The VIN provides no proof of Thunderbolt status. The only distinguishing marks are a metal disclaimer plate riveted inside the glove box door, which is reproducible, and the physical modifications themselves. Fiberglass hood, fenders, doors, plexiglass windows, battery relocation, ram air induction system, the 427 engine. Every single one of these components is now available as a reproduction from suppliers like Kreitz Performance Parts. One collector visited the Ray Skillman car collection, crawled around and under a white Thunderbolt, and could not tell if it was an original or a very good clone. That car subsequently sold for $385,000. On the Dover Drag Strip forum, members expressed skepticism about the Webster Ford Thunderbolt number 68, noting a troubling absence of period photographs. Unusual for such a well-documented program. RK Motors sold a tribute described as more authentic than the real thing, with more real Thunderbolt parts than most real Thunderbolts. No specific prosecuted fraud case involving a fake Thunderbolt sold as genuine has surfaced in public records. But the absence of lawsuits may itself be telling. In the collector car world, disputes are often settled privately to avoid publicity that could damage a car's value or an authenticator's reputation. For decades, a network of obsessive researchers tried to track down every surviving Thunderbolt. The founding members of the Thunderbolt Owners Association made road trips across the country, knocking on doors, visiting swap meets, and interviewing bewildered former owners who never thought anyone would remember them. Dennis Caladzier, a former Ford employee from Huron Township, Michigan, bought his first Thunderbolt in 1977 from a Detroit News ad for under $900. It was just a roller with no drivetrain. His second, the Bob Ford Superstock Championship car he found in 1982, parked next to a garage in Melvindale and left to rot. Bob Trevorrow died suddenly in March 1992, just 2 years after purchasing the Milo Coleman Thunderbolt. His wife had the car brought back to Michigan, and she sold it in July 1994. His death at such a young age robbed the authentication community of one of its founding voices. But the most dramatic chapter in this story belongs to a burgundy Thunderbolt hidden in a Georgia barn. Phil Bonner was born June 16, 1933, in Haralson County, Georgia. He started drag racing in 1954 at Fairburn Dragway, a dirt strip he believed was the first in the eastern United States. He worked at Al Means Ford in Decatur, Georgia. Their slogan was, "Horsepower Sales." He caught Ford's attention and was recruited into the factory drag team in 1962. He received one of the first 11 Thunderbolts in late 1963, painted vintage burgundy, the signature color of the original Ford drag team cars. His first Thunderbolt was destroyed when a member of his crew rolled and totaled it at Paradise Dragway in Calhoun, Georgia, while Bonner was away racing a Falcon at another event. Ford replaced it with a second Thunderbolt, VYN4F4-1K229249, originally Wimbledon white. Before reaching Bonner, this car was reportedly used as a promotional vehicle by NASCAR drivers Fred Lorenzen and Curtis Turner. Bonner had it repainted vintage burgundy to match his trademark look. After the 1964 season, the car passed to Bonner's crewman and cylinder head specialist Gene Wilson, who repainted it, renamed it the Prodigal, and continued racing it. Eventually, it ended up with a body man near Stone Mountain, Georgia, who had done work for Bonner. That is where Hal Reed found it. Reed was a Ford big block specialist who ran Reed Speed and Sports in Cumming, Georgia. A client tipped him off about a 1964 Fairlane 500 listed for sale in a local publication. When Reed went to see it, the car was parked under a porch-type structure, exposed to the elements, and stuffed with two 427 engine blocks, cylinder heads, high-rise manifolds, and a 4-speed transmission in the trunk. While cleaning it out, Reed discovered the smoking gun, a 427 engine block with Bonner stamped in block letters into the casting. Reed bought everything. Then he hid it. For more than 20 years, the Thunderbolt sat in his barn. It was blocked behind a 1960 Ford F-100 pickup, whose brakes had locked up approximately 20 years earlier, effectively creating an immovable sentry. Particle board panels covered the door openings. Nobody got in. A handful of Thunderbolt hunters knocked on Reed's door over the years, hoping to find the car or its current whereabouts. All were rebuffed. When Donald Allen, widely recognized as one of the finest Ford restorers in America, visited Reed over a decade before he eventually bought the car and asked about the Thunderbolt, a very cool and collected Reed acted as if he knew nothing about it and responded, "What Thunderbolt?" Even Phil Bonner himself tried to buy the car back. Reed declined offer after offer. In spring 2014, Reed was hospitalized with a serious illness. He needed money. Through his childhood friend Charlie Boulware, he connected with Donald Allen. A deal was struck in late 2014. Phil Bonner never saw the car restored. He died on November 10, 2014, following a sudden illness at age 81. That was just weeks before they pulled his car from that barn. The car was pulled from the barn on January 16, 2015, with photographer Al Rogers documenting the scene. Here is the twist that makes this story almost unbelievable. Legendary Thunderbolt drivers. Dick Brannon and Hubert Platt both lived minutes from where Reed had hidden the car, and neither knew it was there. Brian, Brannon's 14-year-old son, said that his father and he could not believe the Thunderbolt had been there for his whole life. Donald Allen restored the car in 10 months. Wayne Blackwood, Bonner's friend of 50 years, provided critical details, confirming the car should be painted vintage burgundy, as Bonner would have wanted. Hal Reed built the 427 engine using the original Bonner block, laboring over 100 hours. He called it Black Beauty. The car was unveiled on November 21, 2015 at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals in Rosemont, Illinois, with Reed and Bonner's grandson Preston pulling the cover off. The car was listed through RK Motors in Charlotte at $359,900, then sold in early 2022 for $286,000. The buyer's identity is unknown. No news about the car has surfaced since the sale. It has gone dark again. The 1964 factory drag racing era was not just competitive, it was lethal. The cars were essentially unreinforced fiberglass shells hurtling down quarter-mile strips at 120 miles per hour, with no roll cages, no fire suppression, no window nets, no fuel cells, and narrow bias ply tires that offered minimal grip. At least one person died in a Thunderbolt. The Bob Ford Automatic, the only burgundy car built with an automatic transmission and driven by Paul Harvey, was destroyed in a fatal crash in 1965 after being sold. The driver's name has never been publicly identified. The car was probably stripped and scrapped. Gas Ronda, who won the 1964 NHRA Stock World Championship in a Thunderbolt, had his career ended violently on January 25, 1970 at the AHRA Winter Nationals in Scottsdale, Arizona. His Mustang Mach 1, funny car's engine exploded and transmission fluid burned through the firewall, severely burning his lower body. He spent nearly a year in recovery with multiple surgeries. His accident directly led to the NHRA mandating onboard fire extinguishers. Rhonda died of cancer on October 25, 2017, at age 91. But the darkest story connected to the Thunderbolt program belongs to Mickey Thompson. Thompson prepared Butch Leal's Thunderbolt for the factory team. On March 16, 1988, Thompson and his wife Trudy were gunned down by two hooded men in their Bradbury, California driveway. The case went cold for nearly 20 years. In 2007, former business partner Michael Frank Goodwin, the father of modern Supercross, was convicted of orchestrating the murders and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. The motive was financial. Thompson had won an $800,000 judgment against Goodwin, and the California Supreme Court upheld it 2 weeks before the killings. Multiple witnesses heard Goodwin say he was going to kill that son of a bitch, and that he was too smart to get caught. The actual hitmen have never been identified. The cheating in 1964 was systematic, institutionalized, and practiced by every manufacturer. All 3 Detroit automakers deliberately underrated their engines, horsepower to game NHRA class assignments based on power-to-weight ratios. The Thunderbolt's 427 engine was officially rated at 425 horsepower. Actual output was well over 500 horsepower. NHRA eventually began developing its own power figures because years of Detroit's perpetual underrating of engine output had become too blatant to ignore. Weight manipulation was equally brazen. The Thunderbolts were built to hit the NHRA minimum of 3,200 pounds. One example weighed 3,203 pounds only with a full tank of gas. When NHRA ruled Ford's fiberglass front bumpers non-compliant, Ford switched to aluminum. Chrysler responded with acid-dipped steel body panels, chemically thinning the metal to reduce weight while maintaining a stock appearance. That practice obviously compromised crash protection. The escalation reached absurdity with altered wheelbase modifications. Chrysler's Ram Chargers moved the front wheels of their 1964 AFX Dodge forward 2 to 3 inches. The change was subtle enough that unless you had another similar car to compare, you would not notice, except at the finish line. By 1965, Chrysler went extreme. Belvederes and Coronets had their rear axles moved forward 15 inches and their front suspension moved forward 10 inches, creating grotesquely distorted, funny-looking cars that NHRA immediately banned. These became the first funny cars. The Thunderbolt authentication crisis exists within a much larger vintage car fraud epidemic. An old joke in the collector world captures it perfectly. 15 were built, of which just 25 are known to exist. The most relevant case study is Kermit Milburn, a prominent Oklahoma attorney who ran a sophisticated Shelby Mustang counterfeiting operation. Milburn researched genuine Shelby Fairlane ends, stole them, and had his mechanic grind off original numbers and stamp new ones. The scheme collapsed when a legitimate Shelby owner discovered a car at an Indianapolis auction carrying his VIN. Police found blank Ford and Shelby VIN plates at Milburn's home, along with a secret Ford Mustang decoder book. Milburn shot himself at a gun range in 2016, days after being served with a search warrant. The 6 seized Mustangs were auctioned with new state-assigned VINs. This permanently clouded their provenance. In Germany, the Aachen Porsche counterfeiting ring may be the biggest vintage racing car fraud case in history. Jürgen Barth, a 1977 Le Mans winner and former Porsche Museum curator, was charged alongside 2 others with building more than 20 to 30 counterfeit Porsches, including fake 904s and 916s, sold for millions of euros each with forged racing histories. The fact that an authentication authority was allegedly participating in the forgery has direct implications for any collector car community that relies on small groups of insiders to certify authenticity. Every method used in these cases applies directly to the Thunderbolt world. VIN plates on 1960s. Fords are, as attorney Brian Shook describes, portable. Some are attached with just 2 Phillips head screws. The base platform is cheap and common. Reproduction parts are widely available. And the Authentication Authority, the Thunderbolt Owners Association, is a small private organization with no public-facing registry, controlled by a handful of aging enthusiasts. Here is what we still do not know in 2025. 17 unaccounted for cars. Beyond the 43 known survivors and 22 confirmed destroyed, 17 Thunderbolts are simply missing. They could be in barns, crushed in junkyards, or quietly sitting in collections with owners who do not want attention. The Phil Bonner car proved a Thunderbolt can hide for 30 years within miles of people who would have paid a fortune for it. The production number discrepancy, the official count is 100. But sources ranging from Coach Built to Wikipedia cite figures of 111 to 127 total built. If extra cars were built beyond the 100 required for NHRA homologation, who received them? Were they documented? Could some genuine Thunderbolts actually be from an undocumented overflow run? The Bonner car's current whereabouts. Since selling for $286,000 in early 2022, the car has gone completely dark. The buyer's identity and the car's location are unknown. This pattern of disappearance, hiding from the Thunderbolt hunters, echoes Reed's own decades of secrecy. The unnamed 1965 fatality. Someone died driving the Bob Ford automatic Thunderbolt after it was sold. No source identifies the driver. The phrasing across multiple references, "killed the driver with no name," suggests either the information was deliberately suppressed or simply lost to time. Dick Brannon's testimony. The architect of the entire Ford drag team, now approximately 85, is the last living person who knows exactly how the program operated from the inside. His PBS documentary, The Lively One, captured some of this history, but the full institutional memory of the program, including whatever he knows about Dearborn Steel Tubing records, the $1 invoicing mechanics, and any cars that do not add up, may die with him. This is not a shadowy conspiracy in the traditional sense. There is no secret organization manipulating events. It is something more mundane and something more dangerous. A conspiracy of financial incentive. When the difference between a genuine car and a fake is $150,000 or more, and when the only records that could definitively settle the question have vanished, the system self-organizes around ambiguity. Sellers benefit from not asking hard questions. Authenticators benefit from being the only gatekeepers. Buyers benefit from believing their car is real. And the 18 rebodied Thunderbolts, acknowledged by the community but never individually identified, represent an open secret that nobody has financial motivation to resolve. The Phil Bonner car, with its Bonner-stamped engine block and a parade of witnesses, is one of the best documented Thunderbolts in existence. Most of the other 59 survivors cannot say the same. And somewhere out there, 17 cars remain unaccounted for, waiting perhaps behind another truck with locked brakes. Phil Bonner spent his life behind the wheel of some of the fastest machines ever built. He was recruited by Ford, given cars worth a fortune, and he watched his first Thunderbolt destroyed by someone else's mistake. He had his second taken from him by circumstance. He tried to buy it back. Reed said no. And then, just weeks before that car was finally pulled from the barn, Bonner died. At 81, following a sudden illness, he never saw it restored. His grandson Preston helped unveil it at the Muscle Car Nationals. Wayne Blackwood, Bonner's friend of 50 years, made sure it was painted the right color, vintage burgundy, the way Bonner would have wanted. That car is dark again now, hidden somewhere, owned by someone who will not say who they are. The Thunderbolt hunters are still out there, still knocking on barn doors, still looking for the 17 missing cars, still trying to figure out which of the 59 survivors are real and which are very good clones.